Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. This divide between right-to-work states and non-right-to-work states is one of the ways that the competition between these laboratories of democracy plays out. But another one is tax rates. The Journal has a recent editorial, State Tax Masochism by the Sea, going through the results of a tax foundation ranking of state business climates. Monet, give us a sense of what that analysis said.
Yeah, so the Tax Foundation annually ranks the business tax climate among all 50 states. So they're keeping their purview focused on policy. Of course, there are a variety of factors that make states hospitable to business, but they want to look at what is in the control of policymakers if they want to make their state an inviting place to potentially run your business. And so they're looking at things like the corporate tax and also the income tax and sales taxes, which also have a big effect on business performance, of course. And what they found is the bottom performers are a list of usual suspects, these very progressive coastal states that mount extremely high taxes on every form of business endeavor. New Jersey was dead last, having the highest corporate tax in the country, over 11%, followed by New York, California, and Massachusetts. Connecticut are also among the top contenders in terms of the worst policy approach to making their states hospitable for business. And the states that fared best were Western states that have a much lighter touch. You have states like South Dakota, Wyoming, etc., who have no income tax whatsoever and generally keep their tax rates very low and who have seen a good amount of investment as a result of that. And so, again, that's not necessarily suggesting that business is the most robust in these states, but in terms of what the governors and legislators in the state houses are doing to make their states places where business can potentially thrive, you're seeing it in these small population states that have very limited governments and have managed to keep their tax rates very low.
Two that I would pick out, though, in the top 10, number 4 is Florida, and in the bottom 10, number 48 is California. Another thing of this editorial that stuck out at me is it says nearly 150 publicly traded companies moved their headquarters across state lines in 2022, the highest in the past 6 years, top destinations being Florida, Texas, Arizona, and Utah. And Kim, that I think is fascinating because when you have a state that is looking to move its headquarters or potentially move its headquarters, that's where you get a direct comparison between the tax climates and the broader business climates in some of these states because they're really comparing apples and apples. They are imagining a site in one state, one city, and doing a direct comparison with a site in another state and another city. And a couple of examples that are cited by the Tax Foundation report says in 2010, Northrop Grumman chose to move its headquarters to Virginia over Maryland, citing the better business tax climate. That's an area where you have two states in the District of Columbia in close proximity, and it's just a question of which side of the Potomac River you want to be on. And also these expansions of Intel building a chip-making facility in Arizona. I think that's right along the lines of what we've seen in the automaking business, where companies are expanding and building and creating jobs where they are welcome and where the incentives are in place to encourage them to do so.
This strikes me as one of those outcomes where the states in question, those high tax states, didn't quite internalize how much the environment changed 2 or 3 years ago when COVID hit. And it's another one of the outcomes of this. You know, we've talked a lot on this program about how the COVID moment shook up the entire education sector across the country. Parents enraged over the lockdowns and what they saw that their kids were being taught, and this enormous shift now in states moving to school choice and kicking out their school boards. We've seen the exact same thing happen in the corporate and tax world. For many, many years, a lot of these businesses sat and took it as their states raised corporate taxes because their attitude was, well, our entire workforce is located here. It would amount to enormous disruption to go somewhere else. Then COVID happened and the era of remote work. And also companies came to see how willing, in many cases, their own employees were to pick up and move somewhere else because of lockdowns and different things they didn't like about their states. This has inspired companies to start making that move. Maybe they don't get their whole workforce to go with them, but that's okay increasingly because there are more and more workers who are working remotely. So maybe you get them to come at some point. Maybe they can do their job from somewhere else. Add to this the fact that, much as we've seen with school choice out there, you've had states that have now been working hard to improve their own business climate and in a little bit of a competition to see who can get the best deal and who can get the most people to come. So if you look at that tax foundation analysis over recent years, Arizona climbed 5 spots in the ranking to number 14 by cutting its income tax to 2.5%. Colorado, we noted in the editorial, stands out among Democratic-controlled states with a pretty low 4.4% top corporate rate, but it dropped 6 spots as other states like Mississippi and Wisconsin cut their taxes. So there's now this big awareness among lawmakers in different states that they have an opportunity here to very much increase their own tax coffers by becoming more competitive and also doing other policy type changes that make it easier for people to move there, make home buying easier, reducing mandates, other kinds of mandates on companies. And you're really beginning to get a big split here between the states that are working hard to get people to move there and those that don't seem to have caught on to just how big a deal this is in the last few years.
That split also sticks out to me, and it's where I was going to go next, because it does seem, if you look through what states are doing, that it is almost as if the red states are getting redder and the blue states are getting bluer. You have states like North Dakota and Iowa and Arizona that are cutting their taxes. And meanwhile, in states like Washington and Massachusetts, Monet, it seems like the tax man can never get enough. And so it seems like, along with the broader national political polarization we have seen, we're getting a dynamic in the states where they are going in only one of two directions. And it is the states that you would expect that are going left and right, respectively.
That's an interesting point. I do think that you picked two of the biggest culprits in Washington and Massachusetts. Washington State, an interesting case because its constitution forbids it from imposing a traditional income tax. So legislators had to get inventive and imposed capital gains tax, which they framed as an excise tax, a different sort of tax. And that's currently being litigated. It's possible that the Supreme Court will weigh in. In Massachusetts, they also had to find an inventive way to lift their tax rate. Their income tax had been 5%, but by referendum, voters ended up approving last November an increase to 9%, which now makes it one of the highest tax states in the country. But I do think that the optimistic take is that a lot of these coastal states actually were increasing their tax rates much more aggressively before the period of intense competition that Kim pointed to a bit ago. You had states like New Jersey increasing its income and corporate tax rates. You had New York under Andrew Cuomo increasing its income tax rates, imposing a penalizing rate on millionaires. And you have seen much less of that, I think, over the past 4 years. And another reason why they might have slowed down a little bit is because they're no longer able to count on voters being able to deduct the full cost of their state taxes from their federal bills. So they know that there's less of an appetite in their states for these endless tax increases. And so, yes, the states are diverging in the sense that a lot of these red states actually have been aggressively cutting their taxes and reaping the benefits. But I do think that even these progressive states on the coast actually have been moving a little bit more slowly, with a couple of exceptions, probably as a result of some of that tax competition. And so people who are in these coastal states are benefiting, even if they're not getting direct tax reductions.
Thank you, Monet. Thank you, Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.